This is Ben Davidson.
This is Leighton Gray.
This is Tanner Naday.
This is Tom Luongo.
This is Chuck Prodnick.
This is Alex Kreiner.
This is Jim St. Clair. Welcome to the Shaun Newman Podcast.
Welcome to the podcast, folks. Happy Thursday. How's everybody doing today? Before we get into anything, let's start here. Precious metals can be thought of as the ultimate insurance policy against economic uncertainty and government incompetence, with deficit spending and fiscal irresponsibility unlikely to end anytime soon. Now is the time to protect a portion of your hard-earned savings with a form of money that has been recognized for thousands of years. I'm talking silver and gold. Silver Gold Bull. There we go, my go-to for precious metals with their complete in-house solutions, whether buying, selling, storing, or adding precious metals to your retirement accounts. They have a new feature exclusively for you that allows you to buy Royal Canadian Mint silver coins for the same price as a generic silver round. Text or email Grahame down in the show notes for more details. McGowan Professional Chartered Accountants. I'll be interested to see how Kristen did in running for the school board. In the meantime, they offer accounting, bookkeeping, business consulting, training, financial planning, and tax planning. And maybe, just maybe, she'll be on the Northwest School Board Division Board of Trustees? Board of, I don't know what that's called. I don't know why I'm spacing on it. Regardless, we've been talking about that for the last few weeks. So best of luck to Kristen. You're hopeful that she got it. In the meantime, her business, offer accounting, bookkeeping, etc., etc. Go to McGowan.ca, McGowanCPA.ca for more. Substack, it's free to subscribe to. And Sunday nights, 5 p.m., we have Week in Review that comes out, and you can get caught up on all the craziness that continues to happen Monday through Friday on the SNP. And wouldn't you know it, the S&P Christmas party has one table left. It might be spoken for. I'm not exactly sure. As of the recording this, there's one left. So if you've been really going, I wonder if I should wait, I would wait any longer because we're down to one table. That's all we got left. That's the Dueling Pianos, November 29th at the Gold Horse Casino here in Lloydminster. Cornerstone Forum, it's returning May 10th in Calgary, Alberta. Tom Luongo, Alex Kreiner, Chuck Prodnick, Kalen Ford, Chris Sims, Tom Bodrovics, more going to be coming. Yes, I'm dragging my feet and working on it. And we hope to see you there. We're going to have a trade show. That's going to be interesting. And it wouldn't be possible to be in Calgary if it wasn't for Silver Gold Bull and BVCU. That's Bull Valley Credit Union. They're going to both be on the podcast actually here coming up as well. That should be interesting. But those two companies really made a strong case for bringing it to Calgary this year. So we're going to see, we're going to have some fun. And early bird tickets are up down in the show notes. They're not going to be any cheaper than what they are now, folks. And yes, I've been getting some texts about whether or not I'm going to be selling tables with Tom Luongo and Chuck Prodnick and everybody else. Yes, we're going to do that. Those are going to be up here in the next couple of weeks. And we'll be doing that as we announce more speakers coming to it. So, I guess that's pretty much where I'm at today. Let's get on to that tale of the tape. He served in the Canadian military for 8 years and was employed by the Canadian Taxpayers Federation and now a Canadian author. He wrote Fix Canada, and it's its 22nd edition with over 90,000 copies sold. I'm talking about Jeff Willerton. So buckle up. Here we go. Welcome to the Shaun Newman Podcast. Today I'm joined by Jeff Willerton. So, sir, thanks for hopping in.
My pleasure, Shaun. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I you know what? You're just joking. We'll get to how people can find you. Let's start with who the heck you are. I get the Fix Canada book. Is that my copy?
No, that's yours right there behind your computer.
You know, folks, it has been a wild ride this morning. I've been out to the farm, back in, getting everything set up. Jeff's, saw my one-man band impression as I run around the studio, getting things ready. Let's start with this. For people watching online, there you go. There's the book, Fix Canada, the 22nd edition. But let's just start with who the heck you are, because I'm going to assume some people know who you are. But there's probably going to be a ton who don't.
There will be very few who do. But anyways, just a guy who grew up in Winnipeg. I joined the military out of high school, bounced around the country for a little while, ended up in Alberta, in Barhead, writing a weekly column for 3 small North Central Alberta papers. Did it for a year and a half, collected those columns into a book the following year, and have been revising and updating it ever since, leading to what is now the 22nd edition of Fix Canada.
So you only wrote them for a year and a half?
I wrote the column for a year and a half, from the spring of 98 to the fall of 99.
Why didn't you, not even, I don't even mean, what led to not continuing on with it?
Well, what led to it in the first place? I was up there working for the Canadian Taxpayers Federation in the area. A guy on our editorial page passed away. His last words to me were, "I think we think alike on a lot of issues." And we looked me in the eye, and we parted company. And 5 days later, he dropped dead in his chicken coop, and they opened up his space in the paper to guest writers. I saw an opportunity. My occasional letter to the editor then became 430-word submission every week, and they published me every week but 3 in the following 6 months, and they finally just gave up and gave it to me as my own byline. So I ran with it for a year and a half. As I say in the book, I was paid the princely sum of $15 a week for that column. It was my coffee money. I loved it. I would have done it for free. I loved it so much. But after a year and a half, I had to leave the area to work. I became a long-haul truck driver, so I was no longer around.
You had to give it up?
I had to give it up. Yeah, so I did. But the following year, I was back in sales, made some money, and I thought, what am I going to do with this $10,000 burning a hole in my pocket? I know. I'm going to republish my columns in book format. So I did that in the fall of 2000, and have been revising and updating it ever since, hoping to have a positive impact on society, of course.
Well, okay. I highlighted some things.
Cool. Most people do.
Well, because one of the things about being, sorry, you wrote these columns between what years again?
The spring of 98 and the fall of 99.
Okay. So in 98, I was 12 years old. I wasn't paying attention to boo. Okay.
Gotcha.
And I want to go back to, I don't know whether to start after, is it Vrend?
Vreen.
The
Dell and Vreen decision, 1998.
Or do you want to go sooner than that in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms?
Let's start with Vreen. It was the spring of 1998. It was the Supreme Court made the decision, basically stipulating that Alberta had to read sexual orientation into Alberta's Individual Rights Act, and that is almost on the day that John Mormon passed away. So all of a sudden, I have an opportunity to write a 430-word column on what? Well, it's going to be the news of the day, and it was the Dell and Vreen decision. So that's why it's the first issue that I do.
Why is Vreen not a household name? I mean,
it is in some circles. It is in some circles, and it's just one of those historical things that fades with time, I guess. But
what was the significance? Like when you look back on that, where you sit now.
Mm-hmm.
I guess say it again.
It was a critical step on the road to free marriage, on the road to gay marriage. Sorry, the Dell and Vreen decision was a rather critical step on the road to gay marriage in 2025, 7 years later. And
what did it have to read into the Alberta Bill of Rights? Forgive me, I want to make sure I heard this.
Read the I don't know it off the top of my head, but it about the inclusion of sexual orientation in Alberta's Bill of Rights.
So
we could not discriminate based on sexual orientation, therefore opening up the road to gay marriage
being accepted because churches wouldn't be able to
promoted and legalized and mandated.
Because you wouldn't be able to discriminate, saying marriage has to be between a man and a woman.
Right, the definition went out the door.
So it gets to the point where now, is it California, where they're talking about possibly being able to be married to multiple people,
of course,
or animals,
of course.
A piece of fruit, or whatever you want, right?
Right.
You can see
any
where
number of people, any whatever you want. I suppose I don't know how far it's going to go, but the left is never satisfied. The left never says enough. So, there's a biblical reference to some animal that never has enough. But anyways, but the left, generally speaking, never says enough. There's always further left to go, further they can push. And you keep pushing, we're going to end up in communism. And my objective politically for the last 20 years plus has been to retard that process, slow it down, and reverse it. We don't want to go there.
So I was telling you when we first met, I got given your book in the middle of COVID. Now I can't remember what version. It probably was the COVID version. I assume.
Might have been. I've been through town a handful of times over the years.
But one of the things I remember as soon as I started reading this edition about gay marriage was I was like, not that I guess even now I'm like, I don't know, is gay marriage that big of a deal, right? As a younger man than you, is gay marriage that big of a deal? But when I start looking at, let's say, MAID, you think, oh, MAID happened in 2016. Somebody just flicked a switch and it just happened. Mm-hmm. But then when you dig into it, it took years upon years upon years of lobbying to finally get MAID. And the same thing is true of, I've had Patrick Moran of Greenpeace, right?
Oh, nice.
Years and years and years.
Love that guy.
And then all of a sudden it's become where we're at climate insanity.
Mm-hmm.
Free drugs just didn't happen overnight. That's people lobbying the government. And once it happens, you open Pandora's box.
And exactly. And then you're at the top of a slippery slope. And gay marriage has led to gay-straight alliances in the schools, down not just in our high schools, but our junior highs and our elementary schools, right down to kindergarten, right? And the promotion of a lifestyle. And that's just one of many issues that I deal with in here. It's not all about that.
Yeah, I agree.
By any stretch of the imagination. But
the reason I brought it up
it was the start of a slippery slope.
Yeah, the reason I brought it up is it really cemented in my brain when I was thinking about the issues of today. Mm-hmm. The reason why you try and hold some of them back for a lot of different reasons is because once they're opened up, I mean, just take MAID, for example, right? 2-track system now, foreseeable death, non-foreseeable death. Mm-hmm. It's going down the pipe. You're giving it, you're offering it to military vets and mm-hmm. down mature minors at some point, maybe, right?
Exactly,
and you go,
exactly.
Even if you hold it off, they're never going to stop.
In Holland, a 12-year-old qualifies for MAID with parental permission. With parental permission, a 16-year-old does not require it. Right? That's where we're headed.
That's where we're heading.
Yes.
Like
we never should have started on this road in 2016.
But they play off of people's, I don't know. What do they, I guess I'm curious your thoughts.
They play off of people's emotions. Absolutely. And lack of insight into issues and a misunderstanding of where things lead. Like socialism sounds really nice. From whom, how's the socialism mantra go? I had it in my head this morning. But, anyhow, sorry, not sure. Socialism sounds good. From those who have to those who haven't, kind of thing. But who gives people what gives people the right to other people's stuff? It's a misnomer. It's a misconception. No one has a right to other people's stuff. But that is the mantra of socialism. But the problem is not just socialism itself, and that's problematic in itself, but where it leads, as Vladimir Lenin said very well, and you know what he's talking about, socialism is the first necessary step on the road to communism. So we want to stop this leftward drift. That's why I write books and run for office.
Did you ever think of running for office?
Did I ever think of it? I run 14 times.
You run 14 times?
Unsuccessfully. So, yeah. That's why I'm still peddling books, and I love doing it.
Who did you run for?
I've run as an independent. I've ran for the Christian Heritage Party federally a few times. And I used to run, back in the day, I was running for the Social Credit Party in Alberta when it was still a thing.
And then it eventually becomes the Wild Rose, correct?
No, the Social Credit Party is practically disintegrated now. But no, the Wild Rose was another matter. I was a founding member of the Wild Rose Party with Link Byfield. Actually, that was after the Social Credit days. I was a founding member of the Wild Rose Party with Link Byfield and Marilyn Burns and other people back in 2007. So that was the kind of the avenue I was on.
Why well, I don't know. Yeah, I just forgive my scatterbrain. You're talking about. I hear these things and I'm like, okay. I have so many questions because I'm like, the social what was it? The Social
Credit Party.
Which was ran for what, like 30 some years straight, correct?
Exactly. They were
under
Ernest Manning and
who was the guy before him?
William Aberhart.
William Aberhart. Yeah. That's right. Bible Bill.
That was the best political era in the province's history, but its time is gone. At the end of the day.
So you look at the Wild Rose. Mm-hmm. If I think, like we were having this discussion the other day about like when there's no Conservative Party. Look at BC, okay?
Right.
You had the NDP and you had the United Conservative Party, right? United, what did they call that? BC United.
Right.
And then they folded and
BC
gave
United.
rise to the latest version of
the Conservative Party, BC.
Right.
Right.
And then they almost get second.
Mounted a credible challenge
Right.
in this last provincial election.
But you're not fighting amongst 4 conservative parties, right? And so you look at Saskatchewan. You had the Sask Party, which everybody deems conservative,
Of course.
against the NDP, which everybody deems
Socialist.
Socialist, thank you.
Exactly.
And then you had the Sask United, the Buffalo Party, on and on and on and went.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody could seem to pull enough from the Conservative Party to make. And I think, we did a live election stream on it. BC or Sask United, forgive me, seemed like it was going to win a seat or two, and then it didn't amount to anything. So, in my young, naive political eyes, the Wild Rose is kind of interesting because it was going up against the Conservative Party and was doing quite well.
The Wild Rose Alliance
So,
you're referring to.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, the Wild Rose Alliance, right? It became the official opposition, did it not?
You did? Okay. I would think so. I forget the details, who won how many seats. But yeah, it was a contender. It was a contender back in the day. And then Danielle Smith crossed the floor, and it was not a contender anymore. And to join the Tories. And I think that was I ran against Danielle for the leadership of the Wild Rose Alliance in 2009. I don't know if you got to that point in the book.
Yes, I did.
Okay.
Yep.
But, I felt that she would be very bad for the party and the province in the long run
Why is that?
because of her libertarian views. I'm a conservative. What's his name? Brad Trost ran for the leadership of the federal Tories back in 2017 against Andrew Scheer. He called himself the 100% conservative on the ballot. Not that he's 100% conservative on every issue. He might be very close to that, but I think he probably is. But what he was saying was he wasn't just fiscally conservative and socially liberal. He was both, and therefore he was 100% conservative. I describe myself the same way. Danielle Smith is very liberal on social issues. She's widely known to be. And so she would call herself a fiscal conservative. Fiscal conservatives are basically liberals who think balanced budgets are cool. I want more than that. I want more than that out of a political leader.
Can we unpack that? Because, it was just like a couple days ago, folks, we were talking about what is a conservative? And you just pointed out something that I hear over and over. Fiscally conservative, socially
Liberal.
Liberal. What do you...
Well, I make the point in the book that these are incompatible. You can't... It's hard to be fiscally conservative, credibly, and believe in flushing future generations of taxpayers down the toilet. Okay, so it's the two are incompatible: fiscal conservatism and social liberalism. It's hard to marry them, and libertarians basically do that. Therefore, there's some incongruency there.
Just because in order to be fiscal conservative, you have to do things that would...
One of the hallmarks of social liberalism is the right to abort, your choice, your body, your choice. But it's not your body; it's someone else's body, of course. And the right to marry off our progenitors to each other. These are hallmarks of social liberalism, but they both make that balanced budget a dream that'll never come true. With me?
I don't know. I'm like,
okay.
I'm like, that was, I don't know. Try again.
Try again. Basically, my beef with Danielle back in the day was that she was libertarian. She was a fiscal conservative, fair enough, like that. Balanced budget is critical. One of the most important things we can do for future generations is create an economy with a robust economy where we can support our families and plan for the future and so on and so forth. That's critical. So fiscal conservatism is very important. But if at the same time you're pursuing socially liberal issues like abortion and gay marriage and so on and so forth, these things are in the long run counterproductive. You can't balance the budget while you're flushing future generations of taxpayers down the toilet, right?
You're talking abortion.
Human beings. I'm talking abortion. Talking human beings. Exactly. Future taxpayers. So these things are all interconnected, and you can't separate them very easily.
You can't be pro-abortion or pro-choice.
Pro-choice.
Yeah, we can't use those words. We gotta use the.
Okay, their words. We'll use their words for the argument's sake. Pro-choice. Okay.
I don't know. It makes me laugh because you got the ethics commissioner, and I'm just annoyed by that whole realm because they can do whatever they want, get caught in everything they want, and it's
and nothing happens.
Ethics violation. And you're like, oh, why isn't it a criminal violation?
Right.
If it was me and you, we'd be in the slammer for quite some time.
Right.
And politicians seem to have this different world around them. It really irritates me. So regardless, the pro-choice thing, you can't say pro-abortion because that would be taboo. Once again, it's wordsmithing, right? It's wordplay. Pro-choice. Who doesn't want to be pro-choice? And I'm not here to advocate for either one.
It depends on what those choices are.
Right. So you go to pro-choice. You can't be pro-choice and be a fiscal conservative. That's what I heard. Am I wrong on that?
You can be pro-choice and a fiscal conservative, of course you can, but there is a dichotomy there, because you're advocating for the termination of future generations of taxpayers. If you believe it's my body, my choice, it's not your body. It's a third person taking up residence in your body, and that third person has the potential to become another taxpayer and a very important part of society. I was the last of 4 children. If abortion had been a thing back in 1964, who knows if they, I might not be here to write this book, for instance. You might not be here to run this podcast if our parents had chosen differently. Am I not wrong?
I'm kind of curious. Do you know the abortion statistics in Alberta off the top of your head?
Not off the top of my head, no.
I'm just kind of curious.
100,000 a year.
Is what?
In Canada.
In
Canada. 100,000 a year in Canada. Yeah, sorry.
When you're talking about growing the population by X and they want to do X,
right.
What you're pointing out is, if everyone's like, wow, where's the abortion debate always goes to, when does a life become a life? I would say is probably the biggest one, or the next big one is it's my body, my choice, right? Something along
those are the two sides of the
roughly
the debate. Yes.
And what you're pointing out is, you want to grow the population of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
When you start knocking off 100,000 kids a year, now you have to find those taxpayers from somewhere else, which is why immigration.
Right.
And what does that do to your culture and all the ramifications of doing that? It doesn't mean you can't have immigration. You should.
Of course. Or we'll become another Japan.
But responsible.
Without immigration.
Right.
We would become another Japan before long. And we're all sitting around our dotage looking at each other wondering what went wrong. Right? So no, we need immigration, but we also need to stop aborting future generations of Albertans and Canadians. That's why I run for the CHP, Christian Heritage Party. That's why one of the reasons I was attracted to them back in the mid-teens. The CHP had been brought to my attention in the late 90s. I brushed it off, whatever, and I didn't pay any attention to it, but I ended up spending a weekend with Rodney Lane Taylor. He was then the deputy leader of the party in Telkwa, BC. I spent a weekend with him and his wife and learned a little bit more about the party, but I still wasn't convinced. But it wasn't until earlier in the teens, 2014, something like that, 2012, I forget, 2013. Anyways, in 2016, when the Tories abandoned the traditional definition of marriage, the federal Tories, at their Vancouver convention, I said, you know what, I can't support this. I have to take a closer look at CHP. And I did. I found out they have a wide range of policies, a wide range of well thought out policies on, they have a wide range of policies on, they have well thought out policies on a wide range of issues. And I thought, wow. And so when I saw that they endorsed carry conceal laws, that I was in like Flint. I said, that's it. I'm going to support these guys. And so the abortion issue is one thing, but they have other issues as well that I support.
Do you think that's ever going to be possible?
Don't know.
I mean,
never's a long time.
Yeah.
And nothing is
but you started
possible if you don't try.
Yeah, but you started writing these articles 1998, correct?
Yeah, correct.
So that's 20
26 years ago. 26
roughly?
years ago. Yeah.
You know, you think about it. You go read some of your articles and some of the thoughts you have, and you're like, huh. And here we sit 26 years later.
And the articles are still very pertinent. Things don't change. They get worse. So the columns were written 25 years ago, we'll say, when these things were nascent. And the updates are as current as yesterday's news. So it's a snapshot of where we were, where we are, how we got from one to the other. But more importantly, there's enough history in it. It's about how we got to where we were in the first place, where we're going. There's lots of stuff in there.
Before we go any further, I'm going to make sure I remember to do this. Anyone who comes in here.
What's that?
That is a 1 ounce silver coin.
That looks like a silver coin.
Everyone who comes in the studio, silver gold bowl.
Nice.
And me team up. And there you go. So 1 ounce silver coin for making your tours to this side of the world.
Much appreciated.
Yeah. Do you collect silver at all or gold?
I have.
Do you prefer not to say on live air?
I have, but relax, everybody. I peddled it off over the years to support this enterprise. You know, my silver. So yeah, I am silverless except for this gold coin or this silver coin.
This silver coin.
Yeah,
cool.
Yeah.
You know, when you look federally, what's your thoughts on the PPC then?
PPC.
Because there's a lot of people who have a lot of time for Maxime Bernier.
Absolutely. I don't mind their policies a lot. They're not conservative enough. Max, I've heard him described as a chameleon. He'll be all things to all people. I don't know how true that is, but he taught on the important issues of life, abortion, for instance. He's willing to allow his MPs to talk about it. But how long is that? Yeah, so he talked about it for a couple of days. He has no policies on changing anything. And I don't think he touched the other issue, gay marriage, with a 10-foot pole. I think it would be more of the same. I think Max is a diversion. And as you're reading the second half of the book, I believe he's probably financed by some of the same people who finance.
Well, I read that.
Okay.
I got, you know, I almost finished the book. You know,
Nice.
I looked at time and I went, I'm not going to finish this, and so I hopped over a few things that I browsed right to the conclusion.
Right.
So you talk a lot about controlled opposition, or you know, like useful distractions. Something along that line. So you look at Mac, because like I've had Max on here, and very interesting guy. He ran against Scheer in the leadership race for the Conservatives.
Right.
And by looks of it, probably was given the oust so Scheer could be the guy. And
it's quite possible.
And out of that comes the PPC. So out of, you go, to me, from the outside looking in, if he's being controlled, that's a very interesting way to go about it, right? Mm-hmm. Does anyone have that far of foresight, or you go Danielle Smith?
It depends.
Does anyone have the force? You know, her crossing the floor, okay. But then the aftermath of that, was anyone smart enough to see all that coming to where she comes back up and rises to be the premier? I think somebody's got a pretty good playbook if that's what they're pulling off. Right. I don't know. That's just my eyes on it.
Mm-hmm. I don't disagree. I don't know how these things unfold. I don't know how deeply they are planned. But we've had 4 prime ministers in the last 50 years, 50, 60 years, who were lawyers. I forget the name of the firm in Quebec.
It starts with
Desjardins lawyers. 4 prime ministers the last 50 years. They wouldn't have made it that far without his support. But interestingly enough, Max and I'm trying to think of the Tory leader's name. I make mention of him in
Joe
the book.
Clark?
No. Way after that. Who replaced Harper?
O'Toole
and Max are both Desjardins lawyers.
They
as
all
well.
come from the same spot.
So yeah. So
you look at that.
Who is the power? Who is the real power base? Where is the real power base in this country? It's Desjardins and his offspring, in my view. They're calling. I think that those leaders and those would-be leaders will take their calls, as I say, and I think there's a measure of control there. Yes.
Your book, I feel like, and I was just going to flip through it. I can't remember.
Okay.
I'm sure I saw it. I'm sure you saw World Economic Forum, and you were writing about it in 1998. Is that correct?
No.
So those are
No,
after the fact.
Those are after the fact.
Okay, so it's
Yeah.
after the fact.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
let's clear that up.
Yeah, right. No, I'm not. I don't have that much foresight. Guaranteed. I was writing about the UN and how rotten it is to the bone, and it's part of the same thing. The WF is an offshoot, is just a branch office of the UN, basically.
But you have comments in here on Jason Kenney, correct?
Of course,
You worked with Jason Kenney.
I did with Canadian Taxpayers Federation.
So Jason Kenney was a Canadian Taxpayers Federation guy.
He was the federal spokesperson for it. I was a grunt selling memberships. That's what took me to Barhead.
What did you think of Jason Kenney back at the Canadian Taxpayers Federation? It sounds like, him becoming premier, Canadian Taxpayers Federation. I have Chris Sims on here all the time, Franco Terrazzano.
Great people.
Every live election coverage we've done, we've had one of the people who are the spokesperson for their areas on. Got a lot of time for the CTF.
Yeah,
a lot of time.
Likewise. I think pound for pound, it's the best organization of its kind in the country.
So you have a guy who is the federal spokesperson
Yeah.
go on to be,
Federal politics.
and then the premier
of Alberta. Exactly.
of I don't know, the Texas of the North.
Right.
Shouldn't that be a slam dunk? What did you think? I don't know. What do you,
I liked Jason at first. He's a reasonable guy. Very, very, very well spoken, much like Danielle. And until the day he looked me in the eye and told me he favored the concept of one world government. That was 25, 30 years ago now. But that explains everything that we went through during COVID. He was basically doing the bidding of
Schwab.
Yeah.
So
WF.
go back to this conversation 25 years ago, or wherever it lines. What do you? Because actually, that's what I highlight. Didsbury, you were having to explain holidays in Davos as he explained to a supporter.
Right. Well, yeah, I explained that he was a one worlder, supported the concept of one world government. He said it to my face, like I said, 25, 30 years ago. I forget when it was exactly. Guess it would have been in the late 90s. Yeah, it was let's go with 25 years. But anyways, a supporter of his in Davos, Didsbury, told me that he spent his holidays in Davos just happened to overlap with their meetings. I don't think they happened to overlap at all. I think he was there in the basement somewhere, out of view. I suspect.
So if you were doing mental math and going, okay, COVID, I can get where you're leaning on COVID and everything else.
It's in the conclusion.
Yeah, when you look at COVID and you just see how all these people are intertwined and they slowly put them into places, even the premier of Alberta and, the leader of Canada and on and on, you go, oh, it's only a matter of time then in the future when they try something again, and they will have the people and the levers of power.
That is quite distinctly possible. Yes. I don't know what tomorrow brings, but that they still have people in power that we didn't deal with them the first time around. I like the there's a meme on the Charlie Brown and Snoopy are on the doghouse. Something about them. They're doing it again because we didn't deal with them the first time. That's not exactly how it was worded, but it's probably true.
Were people that involved back in politics late 90s? Like UCP just had their AGM, 6,000 people roughly showed up. I forget what the official total was.
Huge number.
Yeah, it was. It was in. We were there. It was a zoo, and
where do you house 6,000 people?
It was at the Western
in Red Deer.
In Red Deer. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
A big giant.
Right.
For Lloydminster, like X grounds on steroids.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, I wasn't there, obviously.
Well, I mean, when you're writing those types of things back in the late 90s, I'm like, were people like, would it, to now?
I was told time and again it was the first thing that people turned to when they got the paper, So there was an audience for it back then.
So do you get hope then seeing 6,000 people show up to the UCP AGM going, oh man, maybe things are starting to change. Maybe people are having these types of conversations more openly and starting to wrestle with some of the big issues?
I don't know. I'm going to keep talking about them. I don't know. I don't know whether the general public's going to get,
But you're traveling the entire, all over Canada. You're having conversations all the time.
I just got back from the South Shore of Nova Scotia, actually.
And what are people saying over there?
They're reticent. They're more reticent than Albertans to a conservative message. But there was a market for my book out there. Absolutely. And people will read it and people will share it. This is a slow process here. Hopefully we'll pick it up. We'll get people to go to my website, fixcanada.ca, and order a book, hopefully. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I want to go back. According to, you talk about lots of different things. One of the things being
I do.
Socialism, communism, influence from outside in, and according to an internal 1968 RCMP report trumpeted by a retired officer stumping for political office, our then future Prime Minister also held the distinction of leading a delegation of communists to the 1952 Moscow Economic Forum. We're talking about Senior Trudeau.
Of course. Yeah.
Walk me through Senior Trudeau, the Charter of Rights and Freedoms from your eyes.
Well, given his communist sympathies, and he was open about that in a book he published in 1968. That was the next point that I come to in the book. But it is a safe bet that it wasn't written by him. Of course it wasn't. He was kind of the figurehead. But I do not doubt that it was inspired by, it had some Russian hands on that project, Soviet hands on that project. And it was designed with self-conflicting document. It gives people rights. It suppresses the oppressed. It's self-conflicted, as I said, and it's going to tie us up in knots. And it has. It's been a boon for the criminals in this country, and just a bane for society in general. And its rights, as we've seen, it defined some rights for us, but those rights were pre-existent. We had them. He reduced our rights by defining them, and then gave the Supremes and the government, future governments, the formula by which to suspend them, which we've seen recently when we couldn't move, when we couldn't cross provincial boundaries, when we couldn't
leave the
go
country.
to work, leave the country, et cetera, et cetera. Our rights can be eliminated. But that's because Trudeau gave the Supremes and the government, future governments, the formula by which to do it right there in the Charter.
So why do people glaze over that? Why
Because it's such a nice sounding document.
Well,
we have rights. Thank you.
Yeah, I've talked to so many foreigners, immigrants who've come in, and they moved here specifically for that document.
Okay, well, right? Then it's unfortunate that it's as poorly written as it is, and it is. I think the bane of society today. Part of the bane of society today, and we would be. I think we need to go back to the drawing board and rewrite our Constitution.
Yeah, but I mean that sounds all lovely, but I'm never saying never because I'm like never. I agree with you.
It's a long time,
but you think of how think of what we went through in COVID. And what it finally took to break the camel's back and have people go to Ottawa and say no more, right? Mm-hmm. You think, I still hear from time to time people who go, actually, COVID was actually pretty good for business. I'm like, really? That's
for who?
That's great. Well, for certain businesses,
for certain, right? for pharmaceutical companies, yeah, absolutely.
I mean, I can't sit here and act like I know the ins and outs of everyone's business, but I've heard that comment. I'm like, wow. So there's people in the population that think COVID wasn't that bad of a time, right?
I suppose they would be in the minority.
So
I'm
if
sure.
You go, we gotta rewrite the Constitution. I'm like, man, what do we have to get to for that? Like, think of how bad it has to get to where people would be that motivated to be like, no more of this.
People have to become aware of how bad the Constitution is now, and how the Charter of Rights and Freedoms is embedded in it, and how destructive it is at the end of the day, and how it not only reduces our rights by listing them, okay, but again, to repeat myself, it gives the Supremes and the government of the day the formula by which to suspend them, which we've seen in practice.
But you got Brian Peckford, who's been on here,
mm-hmm.
who was is the last signing authority or signing
mm-hmm.
signature of that document, still talking about how great it is.
I don't know if he has or not. I should have listened to some of his podcasts, but I would disagree with him on that point.
And maybe he's changed his mind. In fairness, that's a while back now.
Okay.
Right? That wasn't the I don't know, what word am I searching for? That wasn't the way they were supposed to use that document. And yet that's, you're less than a lifetime away. That's the way it gets used.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts on the Alberta Bill of Rights and the updates they're trying to do to it and everything?
I haven't paid any attention to it.
Really?
No, I have not. Sorry. That might be for the next edition of the book, but if there is another one. But Alberta's Bill of Rights would be superseded by the Federal Bill of Rights. Laws, including the Charter. So they would be of limited effect if they contradicted the Charter.
While I agree with you, having something, like the Sovereignty Act, right? The amount of people I talk to that say that it doesn't really do anything and basically states what's already in there,
right.
like Constitution-wise. And yet, just by having that talking point, it's almost like, and I mean this in the sense of I'm not saying Albertans are walking around a little taller, but kind of they are. This Alberta Bill of Rights, it gets through. While I agree with you, federal supersedes it. I also think, I don't know if Albertans care because
right.
It's just a piece of paper, and we just saw what the Charter did, and I think a lot of people are very upset by that. And so they're going to come in the next time and say, oh, your rights aren't. Well, I don't think that's going to fly with Albertans. So I don't think they care what supersedes things if you get back to locking us down, bank accounts going, mandates on and on and on. If you have a piece of paper that goes, nope, not going to do that, at least in this lifetime. In future lifetimes, I'm not so sure because everybody has to deal with what they're given in a lifetime and have to go through like learning lessons and everything else. Where I sit right now, although I'm a little surprised with some of the wording in there and wait to see where that eventually falls. I know a ton of people who are pissed about it. The piece of paper almost gives people a little bit of like confidence of, nope, my Alberta Bill of Rights says this.
Correct. And Ralph Klein would beat his chest regularly to the feds, and then the Supremes would decide against him. He'd roll over and play dead. And Danielle Smith might be doing the same thing with the Sovereignty Act and the Bill of Rights and so on and so forth. I don't know. Time will tell. But it's very possible that it's just...
you just brought up...
It's a show.
You just... Politics is
a show. Yeah.
You just brought up something that I'd pointed out to you when you first walked in the room. You got to be the first guy that I've met that has said anything bad about Ralph Klein. Right. I've heard he was the greatest. Don't remember a single thing from him. Obviously, you know him. Yep, and wasn't paying attention.
Right.
Ralph Klein was the greatest. If he was here, he'd fix it. Ralph did no wrong. He walked in, and he did not want to get elected in 4 years. So he walked in and did all the things, and then got reelected. And I've parroted.
That's what you've heard.
That and so forth. I went, isn't it funny? The one guy I hear that didn't want to get elected got elected again and again because he walked in and did the things. When you hear that, what do you say to that?
I think he did some things right, and he reduced the government. But in doing so, of course, as you would have read in the first half of the book, he brought together the bureaucrats to sit at the round tables and decide who was going to lose their jobs. And of course, the bureaucrats made sure they didn't lose their jobs, and it was the nurses and teachers and the support staff who did, who a couple of years later, Ralph was running around trying to hire them all back because this system wasn't working. And but in the meantime, our oil and natural gas revenues went through the roof, and the monetary issues became less pressing. Anyways, so we need another round of cuts in the province, but it's the bureaucracy itself that needs to be addressed. So yeah, Ralph did some things right, but they weren't nearly what they should have been, and in the end, we would have been better off without the cutbacks, because when he hired them back, he had to give them raises to bring them back, and in the end, the cost of these departments just kept going through the roof, as they still do. So we need, and we have vastly too many bureaucrats in the country. We have, according to Susan D. Martinock, and her book, the name of which escapes me right now, about our healthcare system, we have 10 times the number of bureaucrats per capita as does Germany. According to some information that's recently come to my attention, we have 10 times the bureaucrats in the CRA as does the IRS in the U.S. They have about the same number of civil servants serving 10 times the number
population,
of people. 10 times the population, exactly. So it was said many years ago in a book that Pierre Trudeau created a bureaucracy so large it was laughable on the world stage. Those are two examples. And that's not, those two departments aren't one-offs, of course. They're typical of the entire federal government.
And I assume they won't get rid of bureaucracy because bureaucracy controls...
It's calling the shots.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we need a government that has the fortitude to deal with the bureaucracy.
Have you seen in your travels any government that has done that?
Yes. And his name escapes me right now, but I'm thinking of Argentina. Malay. Thank you. Yes. He went in there and he's chopping 80% of the government. Boom, 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 boom. He's trying to. He's working on it. He's working on it. He's on the right track. He knows that socialism is a problem, and he knows where it leads. And he's trying to bring his country back. And if he can do it down there, okay, it is possible to fix Canada. A lot of people look at the cover of the title of my book, Fix Canada, it can't be done. And they might be right, but I think they're wrong. And Malay's proving it.
Well, I mean,
in Argentina.
It's just fortude, right? Like
fortitude. We need a government with some fortitude. Yeah, exactly right.
And you need people to be energized by getting involved. Because one person doesn't fix this. You can't act like one politician's going to walk in and boom, boom, boom.
One person can do a lot. One Churchill stood up to Hitler and wouldn't back down. When his whole cabinet wanted him to capitulate, his whole cabinet would have capitulated happily. He absolutely refused. He was the one man who stood up to Hitler.
Sure, but in order to get, I guess what I'm saying is, okay, Jeff Willerton's ran how many times?
14 times.
Right.
That's both.
You need
municipally, provincially, and federally.
You need the right person to rise up the ranks, get into the right spot, and then do the right things. That's asking a lot. Is all I'm pointing out.
Yes, and you never know what the future holds. You never know when that person will come along. And I think Donald Trump's election in the U.S. is he's possibly the Winston Churchill of this decade. Possibly.
But it's interesting to watch the narratives clash, right? The two sides of media, the two sides of the population.
Who cares about the MSM? They're bought and paid for, you know.
A lot of people though still watch.
I know.
That's
they're brainwashed by it.
That's
too.
one thing that's giving me a lot of hope is I see more and more people being unplugged over and over again. Like COVID was an eye-opener to a lot of people, myself included, right? And more people being unplugged. And as you go through the election, you know, like there's got to be a bunch of people just scratching their head going, how the heck is this possible? You know, in fairness to them, I remember when Trudeau, if you were a Trudeau fan, you were
Justin.
You were just loving the 2019, the 2021. You were just in love with it.
Right.
I had this cold shudder go through me like, what am I missing? Like, what is happening right now? Why aren't people seeing what's going on? Right? And now more and more people have caught on. I mean, if the election was called today, I truly believe it would be an absolute landslide victory.
As much as it was down in the States for Donald Trump, it would be for Pierre Poilievre. Absolutely 100%. He will be the next Prime Minister of Canada. Yeah, there's very little doubt in anyone's mind about that. It's just how big is the majority going to be, right? I think it'll be a super majority.
What do you think of Pierre?
Pierre, I know his uncle very well. His uncle and I go back about 30 years.
Okay.
And I think he'll be. I think a goat would be an improvement over what we have now. To paraphrase Kevin O'Leary, but. So yeah, it's not going to be hard to be better than Justin, and I think he's going to be better on some issues, and he's going to be exactly the same on others. So, could we do better than Pierre? Yeah, eventually, but it's going to take time. But for now, we're going to have Pierre probably for 8 years. But if we just continue to do what we've always done in this country, that is bounce between the blue team and the red team, nothing's going to change in the long run. We're going to continue to go downhill.
So then. Okay. You've spent, I want to say, a lifetime thinking about this problem. Yes?
Well, I would not. No, not a lifetime. No. I was almost 30 before I got interested in politics.
What happened when you were 30 that got you interested in politics?
You and I had this conversation the other day. My ex-wife gave me an article on welfare abuse. I was incensed, and I went straight to Chapters the next day and bought William Gairdner's first big book, The Trouble with Canada. That was the beginning of the rabbit hole for me.
Interesting that something happens at 30. I mean, there's kids at 20 that are interested in it.
Yeah.
But lots of us in our 30s get bills and wives and kids and start to see some of the ways the world works and go, what the heck is going on?
Speaking of Bill Gairdner, I sent him a copy of the 15th edition of my book. I think it was the 15th. I forget for sure now. And asked that he respond. I'd love to hear what he thought. And I was out collecting signatures on a petition one day in Airdrie, and I came home at lunch and lied down on the couch for a little nap, and my phone vibrates on the coffee table beside me. I looked at it. Oh, it's an Ontario number. I put it down. It keeps vibrating. I said, oh, well, whatever. I picked it up. It was Bill Gairdner. Couldn't believe. He's on only about 50 pages into my book. He said he couldn't put it down. So that was like
nice. Yeah.
Big lift there. Yeah.
So, okay, you've spent a long time, decades.
About 30 years, yeah.
Staring at this problem. This is an interesting problem because right now, I would say the way my brain has interpreted it in my short time, I go back to Wexit. When Justin got elected and there was the Wexit movement of 2019, there was just this palpable feeling where if you had the right guy on the right surfboard, he could maybe have rode that wave. It was the wrong guy on a surfboard, and he got pushed into the rocks on that wave.
Are we talking about anyone in particular?
I can't think of his name.
Paul Hinman?
No.
Okay.
The guy who led the Facebook page. He eventually became part of whatever the Wild Rose became, I think. Okay. I'm not 100% on that.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter. The name, honestly, the name doesn't matter.
No, true.
He just showed up, and I remember I went. It was one of the first political, meetings, whatever we're going to call it, just to hear more about it. And he lost 85% of the crowd when he said he was going to be the leader. And everyone's like, well, shouldn't you have like a leadership race? Okay. And I don't know if he just didn't think it through. But at the time, he's like, oh, no, I'm going to lead it. And I'm like, well, you've lost my vote, right? Immediately, I'm like,
if you assume you're going to lead it, just because it was your brainchild doesn't mean you're going to lead it.
That's right.
Right.
And so from that, I've had lots of different commentators come on, and I'm just like, okay, we can sit here and act like Pierre Poilievre, there's a way to not get him elected, and it's going to go Maxime Bernier or whatever you want to go. But my reality says, from looking at the Canadian population and how they interact with him and everything he's being attacked on and everything he says and on, he's going to be the next guy.
Absolutely.
I don't even, you can't prove me or pull me off that.
No, nor would I try.
So you look at it and you go, okay. And then you do what you just said. And so for the next 8 years after that, so 9 years, he gets elected, and let's say he does 2 terms. So for 9 years, he's going to be the leader of Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And if your assumption is we got to get off red or blue, you have 9 years to do it, right? That's the timeline.
That would
so
be
what are you
right.
What are you building? And I'm not meaning you, just the idea. How would you build something? Kind of like I picture the arc. It's like, well, we got this little life raft over here for when Pierre, you start to realize he isn't exactly everything that we hoped he would be. Here's this little raft that's going to save Canada. How would you do that?
That's a good question, but I know the CHP is going to try. Christian Heritage Party is going to try to become that.
Do you think in 9 years people will be like, I don't care if it says Christian on the front, I'm just going to vote for it?
I'm hoping so. We'll see. One day at a time, right? The CHP has been around for since the mid-'80s, 86, 87, or 87, 88, I forget. Anyways, it's been a long, slow. They might have chosen the wrong name. There was a guy in the crowd in 1987 who said no, it should be the Canadian Heritage Party because the word Christian can be misinterpreted. Different people have different understandings of the phrase, of the word, et cetera, et cetera. He might have been onto something, but I don't think the party's going to change its name. And I think we need a bit of a reawakening in this country to the fact that we became a great country because of our Judeo-Christian principles on which it was founded. Okay, and we can return to them. We need to.
Well, Grant Abraham,
Right.
what's his? Forgive me.
In
Grant.
Saskatchewan?
No, federally.
Well, he's a Saskatchewan boy.
Sure.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
he's running. He's got a new party, and I'm spacing on the name of it. That's terrible of me.
Okay.
He says the same thing, right? We got to return. But my big thing is, everybody keeps saying this. Why aren't you all going into, the Christian Heritage Party? And you're right.
That's
like,
a good question.
Why aren't we going to
I'd
the
like
same
to
boat?
talk with Grant Abraham
Grant Abraham,
and find out why he's doing what he's doing, not supporting a party that stands for those principles.
Because you think the guy back in the 80s said you should call it the Canadian, was probably on to something.
It might have been.
But if I look at my track record, I think it becomes more appealing by the day, because as time comes on, and I haven't even talked to him, and just the word Christian. Sorry,
Clarify. What do you mean? What becomes more meaningful by the day?
the word Christian.
Okay.
The world
Good.
has basically, when I had Preston on here, Manning,
Yeah.
we got talking about.
There have been some very important people in this seat.
Lots of them virtually.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
lots have sat in that chair. Lots have virtually chimed in.
Right.
And the thing I found interesting about Preston is his father Ernest used to do his Sunday broadcast where he was very open about his views.
Exactly.
And somewhere along the lines, we said we're not allowed to do that. Meanwhile, our leaders go around and dance the jig for any other culture under the sun. And I'm like,
Right.
I just don't get it.
Promoting aberrant lifestyles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
And so you go, where do we get to in the future where the Christian Heritage Party? Because I go, I'll never. My first thought is, it'll never happen. But then if I go look at Europe, and I see what's going on there, I'm like, don't say never.
Don't say never.
Because
look at Geert Wilders. Look at all the developments over there. Right. Some countries are coming around. And they're saying enough of the woke agenda, and they're scaling back.
It's an interesting. It makes me want to get somebody on from there. Like I don't know who runs the Christian Heritage Party now.
Rod Taylor.
Where's Rod Taylor at?
Rod Taylor's in Telco, BC.
In BC.
Yeah, I'll give you his phone number later.
Well,
You can talk to him.
once again, I don't know if it's the answer, but I'm like, in theory, 9 years to figure it out. That's the way I
Right,
look at
that's
it.
right.
I used to think, forgive me, I'm jabbering on here, folks, but I used to think, like, how many months till we're at this? 3 months, 6 months? Now I'm like, 9 years? That sounds about right. Honestly.
Yeah.
Like, there's
that could be a reasonable timeline.
Yeah, which is the same.
Yeah.
Part of me is like, that's an insane thought for me
For
to have
people
right now. But that's the growth of doing this for a couple of years going, listen, we're just not getting out of this overnight. Like,
Right.
you can't even get everybody to align on, like, this is the right thing. We're going to fight about the Christian name for sure 5 years, maybe 9 years, maybe 20. Because
Maybe.
people see that name. I remember being in the back of a room, middle of COVID, not supposed to be in meetings, in Saskatchewan, talking about starting a new SAS party up. And
A new SAS party. Okay.
yes, and
Not named the SAS party, obviously.
Correct.
But yes. Okay.
and there was a group of them that said this is where it needs to start. And they put the Bible on the table. Now this is 2021, folks.
Okay.
And I almost got up and left.
Right.
So you can see where I've come in that short period of time.
You have come a long way.
I've come a long way.
Yes.
To where I'm like, actually, that makes sense. But the
That's
general population isn't where I'm sitting. I'm probably, and I don't mean ahead of the curve that they're all going to get to where I am. I just mean dealing with this every single day, finding my Christian faith along the way. I'm like, that actually makes a lot of sense. Whereas
It
the
does.
Shaun from, 3 years ago was thinking about getting up and leaving.
Okay.
Like, this is an insane idea. We're not going to base it on the Bible. You kidding me?
Right.
Well,
And a lot of people would say that today.
correct.
But that doesn't change the fact that we became a great country because of our Judeo-Christian principles. It's what built this country. It's what built the United States of America. Okay, not that we haven't both gone off the rails. We have, of course, but we need to get back to our roots. That's what CHP is about. And the book isn't about promoting CHP. The book is just a critique of what's going on in this country. It's a snapshot of where we were back 25 years ago, where we are today, how we got from one to the other. More importantly, again, it's about how we got to where we were and where we're headed. Where does socialism lead?
Are there things you stare at today where you go, this isn't going to bode well for the next 20 years?
Of course. But we know the end from the beginning. As Christians, we know the end from the beginning.
Sure.
And we know the final chapter. And in the meantime, though, we have to be salt and light in the world. And that has been my objective in writing the book and getting it out there, is, again, to influence society and be that salt and light. Shine some light on some issues and flavor society, I suppose.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Yeah, I could flip back through different parts of. I guess I would give the plug of, I really enjoyed it. Like, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it 2 years ago too. It's funny, like parts of it, I'm like, oh yeah, I remember reading this, and other parts it was a good refresher.
Mm-hmm.
You said multiple things in there that like that's really interesting. One was the VLTs, right? Like you look at the VLTs. I look at NHL right now. Every commercial is pretty much sports gambling.
Mm.
Like, that's really interesting. Like, do you know how many lives that's going to ruin?
Exactly.
Like,
how many lives the VLT has ruined?
Crazy. Well, but it's funny.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the thing that I find very fascinating, because in my brain never correlates VLTs to ruining lives. Probably because it's been around for my entire life, and I've never got sucked into VLTs, and I'm like, But then I start reading some of the stats you put in and some of the numbers. I'm like, oh, yeah, I guess, if you're a government and that starts earning you hundreds of millions of dollars, or whatever the number is, would you be inclined to put more of those machines out or less?
Of course.
And if you're a bar and it starts making you money, would you be inclined to have more of those machines or less? And maybe sweep under the rug any of the problems it might create.
Exactly. And they're prone to do it. And the government has, in fact, people who run mortuaries, medical examiners, used to report on the cause of a suicide. If in telling the next of kin that their beloved has died at his or her own hands, if it was the gambling was the first thing out of their mouths, it was recorded as a probable cause of the suicide. Okay, but no more. The government stepped down and stopped that. So basically to cover up the details and hide the data at the end of the day. The Tories in Alberta truths. Were just hiding the inconvenient truths. Exactly. Thank you very much.
I want to talk about, because you'll have to forgive me, folks. I'm sure it's in the back here somewhere. Where the heck did I put it? Here, give me a sec. I'm gonna look. I'm gonna find it.
Take your time.
Because it's really gonna bug me.
Do you want me to pull out my guitar and sing a song?
One of the things, like on starting to stare at Alberta politics in particular, although I'm sure it's the case of every province. I'm sure it's the case of federal. But I'm only one man, and I can only stare at so much.
Right.
Because I've had different people on, The one that comes to mind right off the top is Kaylin Ford, right? She ran in 2019. Excellent, sharp mind. Then gets caught up in a conversation with the guy, and forgive me, I'm glazing over some of the details. It gets construed as white supremacy or whatever, and she gets run off the ballot card and doesn't run, and just finished winning part of a lawsuit where she got paid some money because basically her life was ruined. The next one is Nadine Wellwood, who's been on here, and she talks about being winning basically the UCP race for her area to represent them. Gets removed from the UCP because she wasn't a team player. She called some of the people Nazis for some of the stuff.
Awesome lady.
And you get that. You have one that I'd never heard of from Fort Mac.
Sulkiful Mujahid. I bring his story, shed some light on his story in the
on
conclusion.
December 4th, and there, fine, of course. On December 4th, 2022, forgive me.
Read the whole thing if you want to.
Well, it says on December 4th, 2022, how do you spell it? Mr. Mujahid beat the incumbent Tanya Yeo for the UCP nomination in Fort McMurray, Wood Buffalo. In a friendly gesture to the sitting member in the neighboring riding, Zolkifel suggested that they would soon be working together. Note that Brian Jean's dismissive response, "we'll see," implicates him in everything that follows. At the subsequent AGM of the local constituency association, realtor Atir Mahmood approached the newly elected nominee and said something threatening, causing Mr. Mujahid to back away with his hands raised shoulder level, with palms facing forward in a posture of surrender. Mr. Mahmood then left the building, claiming that he had been threatened by and was thus afraid of Mr. Mujahid. Through the wildly witnessed body language of both indicated the exact opposite. In his subsequent application for a restraining order, Mr. Mahmood listed 6 witnesses to the supposed threatened assault. In sworn affidavits, 5 denied hearing any such thing. The 6th, Kamalpreet Singh, is the brother of Manpreet Singh, an employee of a local developer, Sultan Zaman. Following his nomination, Zaman fellow sued Mr. Mujahid for defamation, claiming that he had spoken ill of him, costing him a home construction contract regarding a home that was to be built on property owned by Manpreet Singh. Note that no employee who wants to keep his or her job takes a contract worth hundreds of thousands of dollars to a competitor, so this story, like the supposed assault, just doesn't add up. Do you want me to keep going, or is that enough?
No, whatever you want to do. Might as well finish it. You're so close.
Okay. Notably, the UCP board, stories with Shaun. Notably, you can get this book, Fix Canada 2020 second edition, at fixcanada.ca, correct?
Fixcanada.ca,
so you can actually go read it for yourself.
Absolutely.
Okay. So notably, the UCP board contacted Mr. Mujahid about the restraining order from before even he himself had been made aware of it. And how did they know about it? For that matter, how did Brian Jean know that Zolkifel wouldn't be serving as an MLA after having secured his party's nomination in one of the safest seats in the province? Clearly, evidence overwhelmingly points to their district involvement in the affair. On April 17th, 2023, the UCP board removed Mr. Mujahid as the candidate for the riding and replaced him with Mr. Yeo, and now the story gets really interesting. The judge who granted the restraining order had no idea there was a political agenda at play, and then he realized that he'd been played, immediately rescinded the order. And at that point, Mr. Mujahid contacted the board hoping to be reinstated as a candidate, but it was not to be. To paraphrase Danielle, Tanny is ready. You're not. He's in. You're out. Too bad. So sad. And the following day, the board changed the bylaws of the party, enabling her to appoint not just 4, as had been the case, but all 87 candidates in the province, and thus power was further concentrated in the Premier's office, which just happens to reflect the globalist agenda.
Right. So, I think what happened to Zolkifel, is how you pronounce the name, Zolkifel Mujahid.
Yes, I apologize to all the names.
Not a problem. I had a hard time with it for a long time as well. But what happened to Zolkifel is similar to what happened to Donald Trump in the U.S. It's lawfare. Lawfare, just one thing after another. To an otherwise completely law-abiding citizen. You know, in the end, he was turfed, and Tanya Yao was brought back in. And I don't think Danielle Smith has a huge vested interest in who represents the party in any riding, as long as they win their seat, do as they're told, and don't embarrass the party too much, right? So my theory is that the impetus to get rid of Zolkifel and bring Tanya back on board came from higher up. Where? I don't know. But it wasn't Danielle. She was just a tool.
Have you sat with Zolkifel and
have I wish?
Have you sat and talked with
Zolkifel
and I'm spacing on the name.
Not a problem. Zolkifel Mujahid?
Yes, thank you.
He's the same guy.
Oh, he's the same guy. Zolkifel is his first name?
Zolkifel Mujahid is the same guy.
Oh, goodness gracious. I read the story and I can't piece together. Thank you.
Not a problem.
Have you sat and talked to him then?
Oh, yeah. I was up flogging books in Fort Mac. He bought one and he says, "You got 5 minutes to hear a story?" And I said, "Well, yeah, sure."
Sure.
It was approaching lunch, and I wanted to get some more sales in before the dinner bell. And so in my natural state of being in a hurry to get everything done, I didn't really want to sit down, but okay, I'm in the habit of sitting down and listening to people's stories. That's what makes this book a little bit better, or considerably better, is because I will sit down and listen to people's stories. Sometimes they'll end up in future editions of the book. Anyhow, so I gave him 5 minutes, except it became an hour. Okay, and lunch is gone, and but it was fascinating. And I heard more about it. I went to the courthouse. I spent $200 on all the documents regarding both cases to get to the bottom of it and figure out what was going on. And so I knew it was an important story. And I said, I'm going to give you a paragraph in the conclusion of the next book. And he says, I'm going to need more than that. I said, okay, maybe 2. Well, it ends up being 2 pages. And it was worth every inch of that column space to bring light to bear on that situation.
Well, what my thought was as I'm reading it.
What's that?
I just should bring him in the studio.
Zalkeefel, he'd love to be here.
Because I'm like, it's just another Albertan.
Mm-hmm. Railroaded by Danielle Smith and the UCP. And not, obviously, like you said, not the first.
Well, it isn't. It's becoming this long line of I'm like, that's a great candidate. That's a great candidate. And Jennifer Johnson now back in.
Right.
I've had multiple conversations with her, right? She's the one who...
She's awesome.
She's the one who compared... I don't know.
But she didn't.
Right.
She did, but she didn't.
It got taken out of context.
Totally taken out of context.
And then they railroaded her.
Yeah.
And then on, and it takes getting absolutely yelled at by a trans woman, and J.K. Rowling, among others, tweeting about it, and all of a sudden she's just quietly back in the UCP, which is good to see her back in there, right?
Did J.K. Rowling have something to do with that?
Well, J.K. Rowling tweeted about it.
Tweeted about Jennifer Johnson?
Oh, that video went absolutely insane.
Nice. Yeah.
Right? Like, you couldn't ignore what was going on.
Okay.
When people such as myself talk about things, yeah, you could probably ignore it. I get it. When J.K. Rowling starts tweeting about something happening in Alberta.
In a province on the other side of the world?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's something.
But I'm starting to see this, to me...
It's a trend. It's a trend. And that was just part of the trend that I happen to have access to. Well, and know about more than 4 million.
I never even heard of them.
Right. Well, exactly. So it was a coup for me to stumble upon that story. It was
the UCP. I know a ton of people in there. I know a ton of good people in there.
Absolutely.
And I look at it and I go, I just want to bring to light some of these stories, not to railroad the UCP, but so we can get it right.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I mean, at the end of the day, I've been wondering why is it that some of the best of us don't run? And then I meet some of the best of us and I hear their stories and I go,
that's why.
That's why.
Mm-hmm. I don't consider myself the best of anything, but I run anyways. I invariably get defeated, but hopefully that'll change one day.
One other thought, I'm going back, I'm jumping all over the place. You have a line in there about Roman Empire towards the end of its heyday, where they were begging citizens to have kids.
Right.
What could you?
I don't know where I read that. I wish I could reference it, but I know I've seen it where homosexuality was rampant in latter-day Roman Empire. It was commonplace in Greece and Rome and so on and so forth. I mean, it's not a new thing, right? And
Sodom and Gomorrah for Pete's
Sodom
sake.
and Gomorrah, exactly. We can go right back to early human history, but. I read in one of the myriad books I read on the subject, and I can't find it, that they had issued a proclamation that encouraging people to marry for the sake of progeny, right, and the sake of state, and but that's tied into the escalating taxes of the time. If people were engaged in homosexual activity, they're not engaged in heterosexual activity. There's a dearth of births in the state. And the tax rate on the existing generation would, of course, increase. And so taxes had something to do with the fall of Rome, arguably, in the book that I do quote in here extensively. But there were other things involved, including the lifestyle choices, we'll say.
Well, when they say nothing is new under the sun, when I read that line, and I actually, the latter-day Romans Empire, which prior to its collapse saw its leaders pleading with their citizens to marry and reproduce for the sake of state, regardless of what they might be doing on the side. I'm like, that's really interesting. Like, I find that, because the Roman Empire was the height of human civilization at one point.
It was one of a number of different peaks of civilization. Yes.
Correct. And so
there have been 4.
What are the 4?
Oh, I don't know them off the top of my head. But the Roman Empire was the 4th. There was the Persian Empire. There were others.
I don't know. Any final thoughts here before I let you out of here? I mean, we got to talk about where can people find you? Where can people get a book?
Fixcanada.ca is the place to go.
Where's your travels taking you next? Like, how do you decide where you're going?
I'm back up to Fort and Mac in a couple of days for a 2-day book signing at on Thursday and Friday at a place called City Auto Repair on McClellan Street or Road or something like that up there.
But you're basically in and around Alberta, essentially.
So it's not available. My book's not available in major bookstores. It's a hard book to find. The hotels wouldn't have either Zolkiefel or myself. We both have enemies in high places, but for one reason or another, we weren't able to get a hotel room or a hotel convention for this book signing. That convention might be too big, but anyway. So we're doing it at his place of employment, which he used to own. But he sold it when he won the nomination because he knew he was going to be an MLA, or he suspected he was going to be an MLA. Strongly suspected. It's a hugely safe riding for UCP MLA. It's one of the safest ridings in the province. But he didn't see what was coming when the party turned against him. And so now he's an employee there. But that is where we are having this 2-day book signing from 12 to 5:30 p.m. on Thursday and Friday, 14th, 15th of November.
Well, if you're in the area, make sure you do that. Mm-hmm. And if you're wanting anything else, the best place to go is fixcanada.ca.
Exactly.
And we'll toss in the show notes, folks. We'll put the website that way. All you got to do is scroll down and click on it. Away you go. Mm-hmm. Thanks for coming in and doing this.
Thanks for inviting me.
And
finally, appreciate it.
We'll see. Well, we'll see where all this goes. You never know, right? Mm. Like Zolkiefel, I'm like, I'm gonna have to bug him. And
Absolutely.
I mean, now the Canadian Heritage Party, I'm like, I wouldn't
Christian Heritage Party.
Sorry,
Yeah.
The Christian Heritage Party. It's funny. I've heard bits and pieces over the last little bit. I've known people who've ran for them. Mm-hmm. And I've just never really given it any thought. I mean, but I've given time to different parties to come on and talk to just see what they're about.
That was me in the 1990s when it first came to my attention. I just brushed it off. Oh yeah, sure. Patted him on the head and I carried on. Right. I was selling memberships for the Taxpayers Federation at the time, and I brought it. It was on the property of a couple north of Barhead. Cy and Jake Stridehorse were their names, and I gave them my pitch, and they turned it around on me and told me about the CHP, and we parted company on good terms, but that was all. I didn't sell a membership, and they didn't have a convert. But again, years later, I started meeting more people, and spent the weekend with Rodney Lang Taylor, and one thing led to another.
Well, I tell you what, we'll see if we can't line up a couple of things. One of the lovely things about the podcast is get a guy like yourself who thinks obviously different than a lot of the people even that I talk to, right?
Of course.
And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. And so I'm already, I highlighted, in a sales pitch for your book, I highlighted a bunch of the books you even recommend in there. I'm like, man, here's some Canadian authors that I've never heard of. Never heard of some of these people. Okay. I'm like, I should probably look into that,
Might be worthwhile.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for coming to the studio and doing it in person. And